a few of us had the opportunity to actually do a table read, a couple of table reads for this project before we actually went into production. And not only was it eye-opening to find out about a time in history that, for one reason or another, we were never taught this in school. But also the fact that, you know, not only were we learning as we were doing the table read, but the fact that throughout all of our lives, this isn't required learning. In a city like Detroit, of all places, that economically and socially means so much to the fabric of, you know, what we feel is true America, you know, and I think that more than anything is what kind of really raised the bar as far as how serious, you know, our jobs were to bring this story to life and to show something that has not been discussed in school during Black History Month, which, you know, is something that where I learned most of my Black history was during Black History Month. For some reason, it was swept under the rug.
Where do you begin kind of figuring out how to play this film? I mean, do you do a lot of independent research as well? Is it all in the script that Mark and Catherine provide?
I think as a combination of a few things. Obviously, there's independent research, but at the same time, there's research with Catherine and within the process. I actually got to speak to Melvin Dismukes in real life, and we had a few conversations before I started shooting, and that was many of the combinations and the blueprint for the character that you see in the movie.
Will, your character is kind of an amalgam, or tell me about him. And
yeah, I think an amalgam's a perfectly apt way of describing him. A composition of actually 3 police officers who were present at the Algiers motel and ultimately responsible for the brutalization of the guests and the death of those men. As I say, 2 of the individuals are actually deceased, but one of those individuals that makes up my character is still alive and never faced any charges.
Julie, who was one of the girls who was in the incident, was on set the entire time, pretty much, and that was really great to have somebody who can kind of check the tone and made sure that we were hitting that. Yeah, it made it that much. You know, it made a really difficult situation easier, but easier is kind of the wrong word here, because also we're very aware of she's watching these things happen in real time, and it's probably very triggering for her. So if anything, I think it just it raised the bar another notch to be able to sit there and perform something that's in front of the person whose life this was.
Well, I'm sure this audience, having just seen the film, can testify to the intensity of some of the scenes depicted. I wonder if I can ask about the experience of shooting these scenes. What kind of environment Catherine creates? How difficult that is to deal with, because there's some real darkness for all of you to get to in this film.
The sequence that would have been the most challenging was the Algiers motel sequence, which was a 3-week shoot, and it was back to back for everybody. I mean, Will was obviously there having to orchestrate the madness of that night, and Algie and the other boys were on the wall, and it just required a certain level of commitment on a day-to-day. And I think Catherine she creates a set that amps that up and supports that. As an actor, you always feel comfortable and always feel ready on a Catherine Bigelow set, because the environment is catered towards your performance, and so the crew are most of the time silent and have to adjust sometimes uncomfortably for the actors, and so that's something that she amped up on set, which was good.
I would totally just piggyback on that and say that often, one thing I feel like I've neglected personally, talking about this movie, is just how much we owe to the crew. We're fortunate in the sense, and it may be the case for people in the audience, that we get to see, how it's made. And really, we have to give up so much of what we capture on screen, to the crew, and just how they embedded themselves in the scenery, so that, camera consciousness wasn't something we had to even contend with at times. There were often occasions where we couldn't see where the camera was, and that for an actor is such an amazing opportunity because it makes it immersive for us, and the hope is in turn it makes it immersive for the viewers.
How long are these scenes running for? I mean, are you doing these big long kind of?
Yeah.
You should take that one, lads.
So one thing that I learned very quickly, and I'm sure that my fellow castmates can attest to, is that you're not going to hear the word "cut" very often on a Kathryn Bigelow set. In a lot of situations, it can be a take can be uncomfortably long because we're used to learning our characters and building the arcs and knowing where we are in the script and what came before and what comes after, and measuring our performances based on that to the best of our ability be able to tell a complete story. But when we reach the end of whatever scene we're doing, the scene keeps going. And it's interesting because, doing a bunch of these, it's funny to hear how, other actors have had the same experience, that they've witnessed a lot of what made the movie was after the pages had ended, the improv moments that continue to happen. In the riot scene, most of the moments that you see here are moments where, I had to figure it out. I didn't hear cut. I got to keep going. The crowd is getting angrier and angrier, louder and louder. They're starting to shake the car. And, those moments are probably the more realist moments of the performance because, you don't know what's going on, and that kind of level of insecurity of what should I do next, and am I allowed to improv? Am I going to piss her off? Am I going to get fired? And but it comes off as more than likely probably what a person would feel if they're trying to stop a riot from happening and you don't know if you're going to live one moment to the next. So it was a very interesting way of pulling some very authentic performances.
Kicking off the riots that night, it was really interesting that Kathryn had kind of like gotten everybody together, including background actors and everything, and say, well, this has to start it. This has to go from a chill affair to a riot in this scene. And I'm just going to let you guys kind of play with that and find that. And that's just what it was. At one point, I think it's like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and you became very acutely aware that nobody was acting anymore. That it's just what it was. I mean, there was a version of it where somebody had taken a nightstick from a cop and was running back and forth like it was a battle flag. It was a lot. But that's where it had to go. And what was really great is there were a lot of background actors who were older in age and could remember this time. And you saw over time that begin to come out, and that frustration finally having a place to live and to breathe and for them to accurately portray. But yeah, in that moment, I think, in those scenes, maybe I ended up getting out one line that was actually scripted, and the rest of it was just, interacting with those around me. And that's what Kathryn does. Kathryn is an incredible director because she, a lot of times, grasps something that a lot of directors miss, which is to trust your actors. And I've never worked on anything, bar none, that has this much trust in it. Never.